there is a formula for different types of attention to detail when it comes to drawings. So it's like, do you need to get into the weeds if the details don't matter too much? No. So you just have a set of drawings, you talk about changes, and if they get messed up, it's like, we'll deal with that, whatever, it's not a big deal. But then if you're doing something that is really exactly the same every single time, that seems like an easy process. You have drawings, you have processes, and you have a method of communication.
Hello and welcome to The Movable, a podcast dedicated to interviewing individuals involved in building manufacturing. I'm your host, Jaret Dory. Please enjoy. Thanks again for joining, Morgan.
Yeah. Am I your second guest and first?
No, there's been a couple before you. Yeah, and I have another tomorrow. And actually, we've got kind of excited about it. Anchor Tiny Homes at California. They have a franchise model. So at the end of March, I'm going to interview Colton, their CEO. So that's kind of cool. We've never met, so we're going to meet over podcast. Anyway.
Nice. I've got one more person lined up for you, by the way.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah. Possibly two.
Cool. Well, I guess I want to talk about drafting. Doesn't have to be necessarily CAD, but that's probably the direction that we're going to talk, because there's always a sketch involved, maybe a hand sketch, but you end up for formal blueprints. I don't think anyone does really hand drafting anymore.
No.
So for Aux Box, do you have a specific software that you use?
Yeah, we use Revit, or
Okay.
I use Revit, but yeah, if I am to hire somebody else, I'll probably request that they have Revit. We've used AutoCAD in the past, but feels like a bit of a disconnect between the two as far as like sharing information, and it's just harder because I'm pretty involved with the drawings.
Mm-hmm. So when you say sharing of information, like between AutoCAD and Revit, like if you have two people working in separate softwares, it kind of gets messy.
Yeah, it's I'm not super tech savvy, but essentially, with Revit, just direct sharing. Your line weights stay the same. Your everything stays organized, and like it's understood from one Revit to another. But AutoCAD, we haven't figured out a good way to transfer files without the fonts exploding and lines not actually equating to what they're supposed to be.
I have just like a collection of I don't even know what the term is, but support files, I guess, for like AutoCAD, like north arrows, section cuts, different things that like were pre-built by, past people I worked with or whatever. And I have tried, and some of them work, but like when you go to, I'll use DraftSite for the little bit of drafting that I do, because it's super cheap and I'm just kind of getting by. It's just like a 2D that looks like it's from 1995 that SolidWorks has as like a companion to their 3D.
Okay.
And yeah, I've noticed the same things. It's a DWG file or a DXF, but it's just like everything just goes haywire. Like I'm sure if someone opened it up in AutoCAD, it'd be like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So Revit.
You draw as well?
So I actually I have a civil engineering technology diploma that I got at NAIT up in Edmonton. And so we had some pretty decent 2D CAD classes. So kind of learned it. And then I went and got my engineering degree. We didn't do anything with CAD there. And then I ended up like my engineering career it was hardly a career, but like it was really strange. And I would end up doing my own drafting. And I worked at a place under a guy that was like amazing drafts person. And so I kind of know what it's supposed to look like. Like he gave me,
Yeah.
like, I only worked with him for 3 months, so it wasn't long enough to really get great at it. And I was doing my own engineering projects, like doing the design and then also drafting them because they didn't have enough draft people to support all the projects. So I ended up doing it myself. So that was really good. But so I do have some drafting knowledge, but now I've been out of it for so long. I just do the bare minimum to get by it, and they're okay drawings, but yeah. Anyway, it'll be just for like permits and stuff. I haven't even trained the shop guys on how to read my plans. Like they don't even really know how to read them. But anyway, so using Revit, can you get like a bill of materials? Like, do you get into that? Like having a supported bill of materials?
No. I feel like I'm using Revit as the bare minimum as well, in a sense. So Revit can do 3D modeling. It can do, you can plug in an address and it can tell you how the wind is going to wrap around your structure. You can, take topography. You can share the file between like mechanical people and for electricians and plumbers. And usually it's for big firms with huge buildings, so you don't put like a mechanical duct in the middle of a set of stairs, and they can identify all those issues long before it's built. We're using it literally for the speed of line drawings. I just really like its commands. It's really simple. So I don't build 3D models. I've done like one in the last 3 years. And it was really simple.
Yeah. So I guess the reason that I've got this whole topic, maybe I should have started at this, but this whole topic about drafting and drawings, we built a lot of our product based on like certain principles. There'd be certain lengths that lumber would come in. It was all about efficiency of assembly. And so we basically just had like our directors say like institutional knowledge, like the guys within the shop were trained on, these are the typical measurements. If you get this size, you'd lay out like this. And that's all fine and dandy. But it would be where we've started running into issues with that is one-offs and be like, what do we do on this one? What do we do last time? And somebody like, I want the same thing as last time. You're like, oh, we didn't record that really properly or whatever. And so then when we hired a foreman, he's like, I want drawings. So we got like something to him and they're pretty bad. And so it's kind of becoming a pain point for sales, for like our operations and logistics. Yeah, like because they're trying to like implement MRP for material management and then just permitting. Like I'm the one that gets the drawings out for permitting. Like those are like the official ones that I will do because it's not very frequent.
Yeah.
And so we essentially need to have someone. We've kind of got a guy that started into our product and then we're like, oh, we're not quite ready. Like we're not organized to like give them, here's the project, here's the deliverables to get all our shop blueprints up to speed. So the guys aren't working with blueprints. They're just working with like these standardized kind of practices, assembly practices. And it's like to have like a product that's the same, like consistency and whatever else. We're lacking some of that. Like for the most part, it's consistent, but there would just be these odd little, like we call them add-ons or whatever. That's like, oh, we did that a little different than we did in the past. We don't really know why. Because it's one thing if we're like, oh, we made an improvement. The other one's like, we just don't remember what we measured it to, and it's different now. And so we're kind of, there's like this, it's coming to a head where it's like, okay, we need to hire someone to come in and like do a month-long build up of all the blueprints, all the plans, visit the shop, get their input, and then do maintenance going forward. Because we really don't need that much drafting power once we get the initial like month or two under our belts. And a lot of our products are extremely repeatable. So it's then like, do you change every do you add a drawing for every little change? It's like, now that's probably just something that'd be commented on instead of a whole new set of plans. So
Yeah.
we're just going down this path of like, how do we tackle this? Do we bring in a third party contractor? You know, these sort of things. So that's kind of our current project.
Yeah. So there's like a whole bunch of problems in one.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm hearing, because I recognize the exact same thing with us. So like we need drawings for a whole bunch of different reasons too. But it seems like every time somebody joins the team for drafting, so we've had two full-time draft people join us when I'm not, like, I'm overcapacitated, if that's the right word. And there's like a huge learning curve first, and then there's a huge babysitting portion of the drawings, like you talked about, like maintaining the drawings. But it's like, yeah, it's ever changing, and you need drawings for different reasons. So the guys in production need a certain type of drawings. The guys in the permitting office need maybe less details than the production guys, but they also need site plans and other drawings. Then our clients need, you want to give them drawings, but not too much information that overwhelms them or it's too technical. And then there's also visual drawings for like media or for like marketing. And so they're all the same, but they're all tweaked a little different.
Yeah. That's 100% what we're facing. All those things.
Yeah. So one thing that we've started doing is we used to have so say we pick one of our models, model one, has like a floor plan, elevations, and 2 sections for permitting. The guys in production don't look at much more than the floor plan, to be honest. But then we have a broken down floor plan, which they start the project off of, and it's way more detailed. But it's still in that same PDF or file, I should say. And we call that like the master plan. And then you start to break out more technicals like flashings. What else? Like, SIPs panels. So we build out of SIPs panels. I think we talked about it in the last conversation. Those are broken down. That's another whole set of drawings for another company. We break it down into all these things, and this master plan just starts to expand. Like, it's huge. And then we start to be able to pull from that plan just like a few of the PDFs, depending on where they're going. But babysitting them is really hard. And I don't have a great solution for it.
So is all of that built in one model and then it's just layers that you turn off?
That's something we started doing, which is super convenient, is basically you can overlay the first floor, second floor, foundation, all the 2D flat, like horizontal drawings, I should say, not vertical, can all be layered if you want to.
I see.
So I've started doing that. We had this huge project that's going to California, and this customer started changing so much stuff. And I was like, I would change one thing here and then I'd have to go back to another page and change it over there, because I like to keep it organized as pages. And then I realized, like, man, I'm like checking 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch here and there, and it's like frustrating going back and forth. So then I started making like what do you call them, groups. So in Revit it's called groups, and if you edit the group here, it changes the group on another drawing. So that helped.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, so they're connected. Whatever changes are communicated from one place to the other.
Yeah. However, they're not changed on like another project. I don't have those all connected yet.
So in a perfect world, you'd have one model for a specific project, and you'd be able to produce shop blueprints so that they can build it, and from that same model, you'd be able to produce a site plan and whatever else was needed for permitting, and also like a basic outline so that the customer can visualize their project. Um, that would be your ideal scenario, and one update would update all of it, but it would break it down into whatever form is needed.
Yeah, I think we're still a long ways off. Like some customers don't care for drawings. They just say, I want that picture. And so you give them, they don't care about the technical side of things. So yeah, I think we're still a long ways off from that, but it seems to me like, yeah, you don't want to waste too much time because you know things are going to change, but you also end up using most stuff again at some point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Landon, when he's doing sales, he's always asking, hey, do we still have that outline of that whatever model, that custom model we did? It's like, oh man, I should have saved that. It's like, yeah, like, I thought that was a one-off. No, it's not.
Kind of from my experience in the engineering world, we would assign like by customer. So you'd have like whatever Joe Blow and the drawings, kind of you have your file formatting, and that'd be for him. And often you go in and use those models for another customer that's similar and make changes, and then that'd be saved under that customer. Do you have just like a set of Aux Box internal plans that are kind of set, and you're always basing off them, or you can just order exactly this like model one, and that's like already done?
I was hoping to be at that point by now, but we're not. So I'm double checking everything with like every order.
Yeah.
I do have, so I have, well, when it comes to like ordering materials, I've started lists of templates of lists of materials in, we use monday.com. And so I just like take that list, that's a template, throw it into the project. And then as I order something, I check it off. And that's as simple as that. My biggest challenge is, so some in our paneled system, somebody moves a window or adds something electrical, I have to retweak all the drawings for that, which is kind of frustrating, but getting pretty fast at it.
Mm-hmm. So with that material ordering, so MRP, I'm trying to think, what does that even stand for? ERP is like the enterprise. Is it resource planning, or I don't know what the heck it stands for. Can you look it up? Anyway, we have an MRP. I don't know what it stands for. I know what it does, but that would be kind of your MRP then. Like that's you have this list. That's your bill of materials essentially needed for whatever project, and then you order that. It comes in. Like you're not using like some sort of MRP that's like, oh, you're running low on this. Like you update it when you get a new shipment of some sort of raw material.
Yeah, I think we started something like that a long time ago, like inventory management in QuickBooks. I thought, oh man, I'm going to get way ahead of this company because we'll get there someday where we'll have somebody else purchasing. I'm not going to be able to manage this. But it was like way ahead of schedule. Yeah. Like we're not producing enough to babysit that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. Some of them are very expensive, and you got to be doing for sure tens of millions to even justify it, because they'll cost 150,000 or something. And it's just money that you won't save, like, because the idea would be, I think, that you would save on either carrying too much inventory or inventory wastage or whatever. But if you're not doing enough volume, you won't be saving 100,000 in inventory, to justify we ran into that too, where I was like, oh, we're going to get an MRP, and didn't even know what we needed. It's like, you didn't even have it tracked anywhere. So it's like and honestly, our system for ordering was like we're different than you guys in the fact that like there are certain materials that are like we just bring truckloads in and they're used and it's very basic
Yeah.
materials. And so it was just like if it gets below this line, reorder,
Yeah.
essentially. If the
Yeah.
screw box goes from there to there, that means and there's none left, order another one. And so we were never like low on inventory, but we did implement like a MRP that it's basically a glorified spreadsheet. I can't think of what Microsoft application it is that it was built in, but it's like really old. And it didn't like, there's an interesting thing with MRPs is everyone has to buy in. So like if the shop staff isn't doing inventory correctly, the MRP is wrong.
Yeah.
And if not everything has a barcode or whatever. So ours is like super cheap, super simple, but it has been a great learning experience for what we do want in the future. And we've kind of started to put our feelers out there on something that, integrates with our accounting and whatever, but we're definitely nowhere near like an ERP that's like 150,000 a year, like Sage or what's that NetSuite, they produce one.
I don't even know. So your struggle right now, I think you mentioned this before, is communicating between the drafting person and the production. Is that what it is?
That's definitely a big part of it because our sales staff will be like, why did the guys build that like that? And we're like, I don't know. That's how we did it. Like, it's like, that's just what we did. And so there is that's where the drawings, we don't have that median. Like to me, the drafts person and the drawings is the medium between, that's kind of like you got this circle of this triangle, like the shop production, the salespeople, and the customer maybe represented by permitting and them themselves. And that communication always isn't perfect. And it's particularly the shop that's the outlier, and it's not their fault. They just don't have the resources, right? I'm working remotely.
Why would they know? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can call something out in a work order like, hey, this is needed, but you're not telling them how to build it. So that they just make it work. But there's not like, hey, we got the blueprints. This is what it says to do. So you have some of that. I mean, you're in the shop right now. You produce the blueprints, but you can walk out there and like communicate and interpret physically like a set of plans with them.
Yeah, I think we don't appreciate quite enough how nimble our team is when we're small. Because like the guys will walk upstairs and say, hey, can I do this? How do you do this? Or this drawing isn't right. And it's like an open door. So I don't think that happens with a bigger company as easily. You have to go through a bunch of people and talk to the salesperson. What did you sell? Our salesperson just happens to be able to build too. So
right. That's helpful.
Convenient. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we have this CSA certification for our buildings, and they come by and do a shop inspection. I feel like they're disappointed every time because it's so basic. Like there's a big part of the CSA is, sorry, I'm getting off topic a bit, but is material handling. And so if something shows it up at the door and it's damaged or I don't know, doesn't meet the standard, we're supposed to report it. However, we never report anything because if it shows up at the door, the boys look at it and say, hey, send it back. Or, Morgan, what do we do with this? And I usually send it back or whatever it is. And so it doesn't go through a whole bunch of people. It's just instantly looked after. And so it's like, you don't have any material handling reports. Well, we just talk.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. So when you produce a set of plans, does it have like is there some sort of standard that the guys know, say for like there's a light fixture here, there's a switch here. You don't need to, like same with plumbing, electrical, you just need to tell them where the fixture is and then they make it flow from there, right? Like they go whatever would be the best practice to plumb or run wires or whatever.
Yeah. So, electrical fixtures. So we have a template. So they're always like an outlet is always at the same height. And the guys know for our smaller models, the outlets go at the center of a wall. at the, like, unless there's some, they would know right away if something didn't line up. So if there was a stud where they thought it was supposed to be, or a seam in our panels, they would come and talk to me and say, hey, what's going on here?
Mm.
Those things usually don't matter a whole lot if you're off by a couple inches side to side. The electrical on the roof, the guys know now where all the lights go. But as far as, we have a list that accompanies our drawings that says some basic details, like electrical panel is in this location. The electrician knows what height that is. Doesn't matter what location it is. There's a downspout in one location. It's at the back. And it's like we always say, we're standing at the front, perspective, standing at the front, facing the aux box. It's on your right-hand side at the back.
And that would just be listed. It's not necessarily shown on the drawings.
It's sometimes shown on the drawings, but that list is almost more important than the drawings.
Yeah.
That list also includes extras at the bottom. So if somebody adds, like, I don't know, screen door or an extra outlet or something like that.
And that won't necessarily be shown on the drawings. It might just be listed there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's their process when building? Do they have like a kind of like a build startup review or whatever, where you review all of that order and kind of acknowledge that you see all the extra listed items? They don't just start into it, obviously. If you miss something, you're kind of going back and adding it, or?
Yeah, usually we'll talk about it briefly, just go over the list, go over the drawings, give them the place where they're going to build it in the shop, and then they dive into it. It's pretty convenient that I'm doing it right now, but whenever somebody else is doing it, you quickly notice all the pain points.
Yeah. So training someone to do that is challenging, because you know the product so well, you know how the guys build it on top of it all. So you kind of have that advantage, and then sort of train someone to have that. Anyway, I get it.
Yeah. So we've hired somebody before. This was probably a recipe for disaster from the start, but she was a really good draftsperson. She was fast, but she didn't know what she was drawing. And so, and she was remote. And so, like, she'd come and visit the shop sometimes and be like, oh, that's what I'm drawing. But if there was a change, she didn't know how it affected the other drawings in the file. And so you'd say, like, we need to move the ceiling up 8 inches, for example. And so she'd say, okay, thank you. And so she'd move the ceiling up in the section, but forget to do it in the elevation, and change the windows and all these different details in the SIPS panels. And so it's like, first of all, we've recognized an advantage of somebody really knowing the industry and materials. And so that's experience, I guess. And then the other is working present in the shop, like right beside the shop. And it's like, you need to have that open door, because there's changes that happen on the fly. There's questions that, like, what am I drawing, or what am I doing? Maybe it doesn't bother some people, but I was told that I'm very literal when I'm drawing. So if I'm drawing like a 2x4, it's not just a line. I'm like exactly 1.5 inch, draw the hanger, like maybe over detailed.
I think I'm the same way. So yeah, that's interesting, because what you just said, I have experience. We have a guy that's in Wisconsin, and he's really good at what he does. He does SolidWorks modeling, and just being a fabricated with like steel parts, like SolidWorks is fairly appropriate for what we do. It's kind of between that and Revit, it seems like. But we really want to bill of materials, because like we want that inventory management and that ability to check things off. But there are certain things remotely that this fellow, he drew 1 or 2 projects for us or built models for, and he did pretty good. Like it was pretty close. But yeah, then all these little nuances that like the location of a door handle the guys just put it where they put it, like, and it might be different, and then draws like the hanger for the door, and the hanger isn't necessarily really like that. You know, it isn't to where we have like a part for it. They're still kind of like building their own little part. And so you get down this where it's like the drawing's there, but it's not 100% accurate. And you're like, when do you say enough is enough? Or when do you like, and so I talked with him and I was like, I'm kind of freaking out about like, we need someone here, because it ends up like you do markups and they send it back, but is it ever really like, without being at the product and seeing it, is it ever really like totally accurate? And he did an amazing job without ever seeing the product, just based off pictures and my drawings and whatever. But I think we've come to the conclusion that one, like we're organizing, like we're basically building a drafting manual where it's like, these are our expectations. This is the form to request a new model and whatever you're for permitting, whatever it is, new blueprint for the shop. And you actually like submit the form and you have all the details in it. And one thing, even with him, I'm very much a like write out my form, even if I don't have one, request, official drafting request form or whatever. I have it, and he didn't read it all, but like that like goes right in the manual. It's like, you're asking me stuff that I wrote in there, but it's like, so he still did really good for being remote. But like, one thing he did was like sent me an updated drawing and didn't have a new date on it, didn't have a revision number to the drawing number. And I was just like, I don't know what the heck this drawing is, because it's the same exact file name. It's the same exact date on the drawing. Yeah. I don't like it's updated, but like, and like right in the manual is like, we'll send this back. We won't even, it's like you send it back and you put the proper name and everything. And so we have like, we're working on this manual where it's like the rules that you follow and the procedures that we want internally. And so we've kind of started with that, and then we're working on like a revisions request. Like you actually submit a form, but like kind of the key I feel like when you have, especially people that are remote, is you need a lot, especially if they're like a contractor. Like we're not going to even look at this until you go back and like review the like. But it's kind of like even in the shop, if you use a different format every time that you submit a work order to the shop guys, they're going to be like, and so that's kind of what we're establishing is like, if you are submitting something for a new drafting request or whatever, the format's the same every time. They're familiar with it and they're like, yeah, they check all the boxes and they go and do it. But kind of, and maybe we're like having to do that overkill because we aren't physically at the shop. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're like having to like make these very strict rules. Anyway, so that's kind of been our first thing. And the other thing you were mentioning about, the understanding, if it is a remote contractor, they have to come to the shop like 2 times like they can't just be remote. Like you have to be willing to travel. And this fellow is, and so we're making a plan. He might be the guy we use. I don't know, but there's some other people that are maybe a little more local. But I'm coming to find out that a really good draftsperson isn't that easy to come across.
No, something that identifies it for me is the questions they ask. Like, that's actually a really good question. Like it shows to me that you're paying attention to these details.
Right.
Sometimes they just draw away and like, here you go. Does it look good? Well, maybe you should have asked before you drew.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. That's a common in the engineering world. It was always like the engineers rolling their eyes at the techs and vice versa. And the guys that were doing the drafting techs, all they wanted to do is draw. And I remember one guy saying to me, he's like, it's so annoying. They don't want to know anything about the project. They just want to draw it. It's like, how can you do a good job if you don't want to know anything about it?
Exactly.
But,
or the other side of it is, can you take what you're drawing and extract it into or expand it into 3D?
Right.
Do you actually know what you're drawing? And and sometimes, I shouldn't say most time, but sometimes people are like, I have no idea what that was.
It is interesting that one guy that I worked with for 3 months, that was like an expert draft person. He was like the holy grail. Like all he had was he didn't have any engineering training. He didn't know how to, you know, analyze a structure to see if it would fail or whatever. But he had such good intuition, such good experience. You could send him a project, be like, I don't even really know what to do here. Can you he would draft it up before he had the engineering, and you would like work off what he did and then just check it. Like, he was that good. And so he was like a gold mine for that engineering firm, because it was just like, he worked really hard. He was extremely fussy. So his drawings were like, some of the things I'm like, dude, why do you even care about this? Like, hey, all that lettering is wrong. You should write that out. Don't have that shortened. And it's like, why do you even care about this? But like, he was adamant about consistency. And I mean, like, he's the best drafts person I've ever met. Like, just like hands down incredible. But they are hard to find, because to have that combination of someone that understands the technical and then is able to apply it to drawings, and then cares enough that it looks uniform and accurate. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. We had a period where our production coordinator, he was really thorough, and he would just read everything, send him drawings, and he'd be like, why is this here? It's like, oh, I just ignored that. That's been there for years, forgot to take it off. But he would read everything, and that was actually a pretty good tool. And he wasn't a construction mind, he was just an organized mind. And he would read everything, look it over. I actually went in the hospital for a period of time, and he directed a build without knowing much about construction itself, because he was just so thorough.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of like the ability to pay attention is pretty key with those sort of things. So do you ever feel like, it sounds like you're pretty adamant about like being accurate in your drawings. Do you ever feel like usually in person is good? Do you ever feel that it's you cheat or the shop cheats when it comes to, say you're like, I'm just not going to draw that in and I'll just tell them about it? Or like, I mean, you do have some examples, or like add a screen door or whatever. Is there any disadvantage that you see, that either the shop isn't as thorough or you're not as thorough in the drafting scenario, like the blueprints, what they're building off of?
Is there a disadvantage that we said?
Disadvantage in the sense, like, I'll just run out and tell them, I won't add it to this. Like, I won't I won't communicate it on paper. I'll just go and like kind of mention it. Do you ever do that, or like catch yourself doing that?
Yeah, like finishing details. Once the structure is in place, that's fine. Finishing details, we're kind of changing those frequently. So those aren't really drawn anywhere. The guys in the shop actually don't cheat that I know of. You catch them every now and again doing something because they've determined that it's not important. But they generally don't cheat. So one of the things that we don't have a real good mechanism for doing sloppy work and covering it up. Yeah. So in general construction, you build and then you finish everything, and then you trim it all. So you cover gaps, you cover seams, you cover transitions, all that. We don't have trim. So my drawings have to be accurate. The windows have to be made properly. The doors have to be made properly. And then they're essentially putting their wall finish or window finish right up to the frame of the window. And so there's no space to cheat. So yeah, they can't.
It's like you do it right or not at all. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So your drawings are doing the communication that's required to build it. But it doesn't, like, you have that scenario in Monday.com where you kind of like go through the checklist, but that's not communicated from the drawings, is it? Or it is? Like,
Not really. There's some communication where certain materials go, um, but generally, and sometimes we have to talk about it. Like, you don't cut that piece of wood in half. That's going to go as a full piece. Or if you cut this piece of wood, it's assumed that, like our finishing pine, don't use 10-foot pieces for the walls. Those are 16s cut in half, and that's just understood. Um, yeah,
But that's not communicated in the drawings. That's kind of institutional
that's kind of
knowledge.
separate.
Yeah.
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 Well, the drawings aren't
as
supposed to tell them how to do their job. It's to tell them what the finished product should be, correct? Like,
essentially, yeah. And if they get the base, um, like the what do you call it, the floor frame proper, there's a really good chance they'll get the rest of it accurate, because the rest is all panels. And if they get the panels in the right spot, it'll be the right height. It will be, yeah, unless they build panels wrong. But they actually are checking the panels for like a 1/4 inch or 16th off or whatever. Electrical chases are checking that each time they pull the panel out of the package.
so do you have any
Seems like
aspirations to have like Revit build a bill of materials? Like, is that something that would be helpful for what you do, or not necessarily? Man, you guys have so many different trades going into one build.
Yeah, I've never really thought about it. I think that will be handy in the future. Um, I think I'm too intimate yet with the product, and
Mhm.
so and the other thing is we allow people to customize stuff, and
Right.
that you can see where it bogs things down as far as ordering materials and like changing stuff up and rechecking drawings. And um, if yeah, I use the only thing extra that I use Revit for is estimating quantities. That's about it.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
like surface area, siding, pine, all that stuff. It's just flooring.
So Revit, as far as a software, is probably the most applicable to what you do, like the best.
Yes, yes. At this stage, yeah, and like I said, we're not barely using it to its potential. We're
Yeah,
probably
right.
using 1% of its potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked with a lady on Upwork that was suggesting we use Revit for our product, and we ended up going with this guy that used SolidWorks, which we're still at like we still have to figure out entirely what we're doing. But his models in SolidWorks looked really good, actually. But it definitely, if you had other trades and whatever involved, anyway, that's something that I need to do a little bit more digging into what is most appropriate. What we would like is like a SolidWorks, like being able to communicate. So we have a CNC, so we could technically take
Nice.
parts from SolidWorks and put it into our CNC, like where it's not useful at this point because it's not like there's that much variation. But some of the deficiencies of SolidWorks, like when it automates its bill of materials, the way that it measures the bill of materials is different than the way the guys think about it. And neither is wrong. It's just how SolidWorks is built. And
Yeah.
they have to just do a little bit of math to get like to how they measure the materials. They're both correct. It's just when pipe is coped, I think SolidWorks does it as if it was a full stick of pipe with the and imaginary, the cope happens, but they're imagining it to where it originally was before it was coped. And the guys think about it to the closest dimension coped. So anyway, I imagine listening into this conversation is super lame unless you're like specifically for drafting. I was just thinking, man, this has got to, I mean, I'm bored, but it's such a critical communication point about like, I mean, for us, it's a big pain point, as I mentioned. Like it's how you communicate between everyone, really.
Pretty much. And like even down to the salesperson or the customer, if like, so your team is going to mess up somewhere along the line. Whether it's tiny or large. If it's large, you probably should address it. But if it's tiny, how are you communicating? If you're not going to change it, are you going to tell the customer if it's noticeable
Right.
or not? If it affects the integrity of the structure, anything like that. That's another part of this. Like, what's worth it to actually address or change?
Yes.
I'm sure you're dealing with that all the time.
So you talked about like some customers not caring and some not wanting all the technical. So I did a site plan. It's like plan and elevation views of this barn that we were building, and the people that ordered it, they were like in town, and so of course needed a permit for the concrete that it was going on to, and then needed anchoring called up, like for wind and whatever. And so I just did the plan for permitting and like put the anchor points, but it was all like center line to center line measurements. And you could have taken like a ruler and like, or like even just did math and figured it out. And this customer got so worked up about it. Like, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. Like, he was kind of involved with the contractor laying out, like they had to put like extra concrete footings where the anchors were going to be. There's like Hilti anchors or Simpson strong tie or something. And he was so like, I had to go and make him just like exact dimensions from the outer edges of the concrete pad. Cause my center line, he was a different duck for sure. He was a bit of an oddball, but like, he was so
He's
worked
listening
up.
to this.
He was so worked up about it. And like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And we're like, just take a few seconds. It's not, but again, it's hard to relate because you're looking at these things all the time. You're like, you should be able to read this. The county inspector could read it. But anyway, there is like having those different presentations for each stakeholder or whatever is probably important. So that's one thing I've talked with this guy in SolidWorks. I'm like, okay, you do these like shop blueprints. They're great for the shop, but like, there's a lot of information that I wouldn't want to send this to a customer. And he's like, oh, I can do a site plan. And that's probably part of our process would be like, okay, let's actually do a site plan. Because SolidWorks is pretty good. You build all the parts and then you assemble them in a model. And then if you have repetitive parts, you can keep pulling them and, so you're not remodeling. Yeah. So hopefully if you get all your models done, your assemblies, then you can just cut whatever drawings you want out of them. Yeah. And he says you can do site plan, but that's, so that's probably part of the vetting process is we'll actually have them do, each one to represent. And then from there, it'll be just, if they can do that, it'll be just communication and for sure some on-site.
So it sounds like there is a formula for different types of attention to detail when it comes to drawings. So it's like, do you need to get into the weeds if the details don't matter too much? No. So you just have a set of drawings, you talk about changes, and if they get messed up, it's like, nah, we'll deal with that, whatever. It's not a big deal. But then if you're doing something that is really exactly the same every single time, that seems like an easy process. You have drawings, you have processes, and you have a method of communication. But then whenever you have, sounds like your product or my products, or I should say your products are the same, but they kind of change a little bit each time, and the use is different, or like the use of the drawings, purpose of the drawings is different each time. It sounds like you need a little bit of, or lots of communication. Drawings have to stay relatively current, and people who pay attention to details, a tech that knows what they're drawing, and kind of a team that cares.
Yeah.
To me, this is like, I wish it was easier, but we can't see inside anybody else's head and make them understand what's inside our heads. Like when I'm drawing a building, I've built it tens of times over by the time it even starts in the shop. And these guys are looking at it for the first time. And it's like, well, of course. It's like, and I got to remember that. Like,
yeah, totally. Well, even for us, the effort that goes into some, like we build a 10 by 12 loafing shed all the way to a 10 by 36. There's sizes in between. It is it's a lean-to steel frame. Like it's so simple. And so says me, but even for the guys in the shop, they can do it in their sleep, right? Like it's when you get into, you're adding all sorts of doors and enclosures and whatever that you get into kind of whatever. So for us too, with the drawings, it's like, there's some things that like build it out, have a quarterly or an annual review to see if any dimensions have changed. And that's it. Yeah. Don't touch it again, because it's just like, but again, it's so simple. You probably only would need to draw it one time. And so I think one of my issues is getting to set the expectation of like, okay, a month or two of building out all the blueprints. That's fair. But then for budgeting purposes, like maybe there is more maintenance to the blueprints, but also maybe the budget can't handle more maintenance to the blueprints because it's not entirely necessary or whatever it is. So that's kind of part of our issue with all this is like, I don't want to bring on like somebody salaried for $70,000 a year. It won't pencil out for us.
No.
And so that's also like kind of an awkward sort of thing to budget accordingly and keep it maintained. And yet one thing we've discovered is with contractors, like there's far less buy-in to the company. Like our leadership team, it's like they think about how to better every part of the business. When you contract someone to come in and do one little part, that's all they think about. Yeah. And so they're not thinking about the repercussions that this might have on these departments. It's just kind of like here.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting size to be at too, where you're like, can't really justify a full-time, like bought in person. But I think there's the right contractors out there, but you have to vet them as hard as you do a regular full-time employee.
And like that's the other thing, contractors or drafting techs, if somebody isn't interested in receiving feedback, that makes the relationship not work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like we had a contractor that did tile for us, and he wasn't good at first, but he got better and paid attention to all the details because he had so many people on him giving him feedback. And it's like, he couldn't have withstood that if he didn't care about that feedback.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, true. And that kind of is your level of buy-in. If the feedback can be taken, then it's probably a decent level.
Yeah. Our last drafting tech, actually, she couldn't take feedback very well, and probably partly why she left us. Maybe she's listening to this too. But she's like, that doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, it does matter actually. But based on my experience, the guys will build what you draw, or they should know, or like, I don't really have to change that. That's how I drew it at a previous job. Oh, it's not how we do it here.
Yeah. So have you ever, like, is it possible, will you lose sales if you refuse to make changes that people want? Like I don't know your product well enough, but it's like, oh, I want to move that over there. Like, would you lose the sale because of that? If you're like, no, we can't do that. Or like, is there a component where you could just like, here's the plans, we'll update them for your area for permitting, but other than that, like that's the plans, no changes.
I guess at a price, if people want it bad enough, they will pay for it, whatever. So it's funny. In this last project that I'm doing drawings and pricing of everything, handling design, customizations, all that. And so there was, I want to say the list had like 50 or 60 items of changes. And so I have to identify those in the drawings. And then at the same time, identify those in my pricing. And so what I did was I was estimating everything, the price of material, price of what I think the labor is going to be. And because we don't do cost plus, we just do for most things in the structure, it's quoted. It's fixed
Mm-hmm.
price. So it was like materials, the labor I thought it was going to be. The next line item was drafting time and a cost associated with that, because I've learned that everything requires drafting time, every
Mm-hmm.
change. Um, and then what was the last? Oh, project management. So it's going to take me
Right.
1 hour combined to talk to the guys about it, to talk to suppliers about it, to talk to you about it. So it's like an hour for that little tiny change. So yeah, it was kind of the first time I did that, but it was like, this is where the time is spent, is drawings and project management.
I know exactly what you're saying because we got really strict about what we would accept. Like if you want to upgrade anything, it's like this fee straight up, you have to pay that. And then maybe there'll even be more costs attached to that. And because exactly what you're saying, you'd have 12 products in queue. You've built them all before, whatever. They just happen. And then all of a sudden this
Yeah,
one, you've got like the leadership team, the the assembly team, everyone's talking like you didn't even talk once for those 12. And then this one, you're talking for like 3 weeks about it. And it's like, oh, look at where all the time went. It's like into this one
yeah.
thing. And so I know what you're saying. You have to get like super dialed in, and that,
I
especially
think
when
that
it's taking
experience
away
is,
from others. Like that's when it gets really,
yeah,
you're like, whoa, we didn't even have to talk. Like we can order, people can order our product online. It's like, we didn't talk to this person. Like literally never even
yeah.
talked to them. And we're just like,
You know why there's change orders, like costly change orders? It's because these disruptions to a process, or yeah,
mm-hmm.
whatever your company's doing, really is a major disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you talking about drawings. I don't think we should record anymore about drawings. I mean, it's such an interesting thing. I'm glad that I actually don't mind doing drafting. Um,
If you
but
have
my
nothing else to do.
if well, it is kind of true. Like I have to, I don't know how you are mentally, but if I'm like, I need to get this done, I'm like, I just block out and I'm like, I go and do it because I will find anything else to do because drafting is very much like you get in the zone and you do it with zero
Mhm.
distractions. I mean, that should be anything, I guess, but like I have to premeditate it before I do it. Obviously you're doing it more than me, so it probably comes easier. But if I'm like, oh, there's a set of plans that are needed, I have to like think about it. I could be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and do that. As funny as that sounds, I have to be very conscious of, like, I go easily to go work on whatever budget or whatever, but like drafting, I have to think about it before I go into it. I almost like pre-plan the entire thing. How am I going to go about it? I'm thinking about that, which I've started to respect people that do work really methodically just because of that. I'm like, oh, I like set up my work. Actually, that's almost anything I do, to be honest. I set it up before I go in. So I've like this, you hear like these gurus say stuff like this. I'm like, it's funny I'm going to say this, but like you have a meeting with yourself about like how you're going to accomplish this project. And then you go and do it. Because when you sit
Yeah,
down to do it, you have to have that meeting with yourself anyway. Like, what am I going to do next? So I kind of have
yeah,
it beforehand, and I really have to do that with drafting. But I do know that I respect people that can get it, that can crank out drafting accurately, thoroughly, and timely. Because like
yeah,
it's not an easy thing, but
yeah. I'm like that with cooking. I have to set a plan
yes,
out and then
yes,
attack the kitchen.
totally,
Meanwhile,
totally,
my wife or your wife might be able to just fly at it, make a mess, not distracted by the mess in the kitchen.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Oh,
like,
for
it's a
sure. That's
personality
exactly,
thing.
yeah.
It's a organized workspace is like, actually, um, my personality assessment was like the
Interesting.
highest strength, but I don't know if it's a strength.
Well, that's funny you say that because my biggest thing is don't surprise me with anything. If you want to have a meeting with me, give me a little bit of knowledge beforehand what it's about. Like some people like will thrive off of just like, oh, what do you want to talk about? And just like very collaborative, just instinctually right off the bat. I'm very much
Yeah,
like, give me the topic, let me think it through on my own. And honestly, like every decision I make is because I have like sat there and thought about it and not like gathered as much info as I can. And so it's like, you never call me up and be like, hey, I want to talk about this really important thing. Tell me what it is and we'll get back together tomorrow on it or whatever. Like, I
I
don't do
see.
good with
Wow.
processing. Yeah. I want to like, I feel like I probably put too much